I am 73 years old now, and my hands shake when I hold a cup of tea. There are mornings when I wake up and forget where I am, when the ceiling above me looks unfamiliar and the silence feels too heavy. But I never forget that night. I never forget the sound of the car door slamming, the way my son's voice cracked when he said those words, the coldness of the asphalt beneath my feet when he drove away. Some memories fade with time, they say, but not this one. This one is carved into my bones. My name is Margaret, though most people just call me Maggie. I used to be someone, you know. I had a life that felt full, a house that smelled like fresh bread and lavender, a garden where roses grew wild and unruly. I had a husband who called me his sunrise, a son who once held my hand like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. I had everything I thought I needed. But life has a way of unraveling, doesn't it? Thread by thread, until you're standing there with nothing but frayed edges and the ghost of what used to be. It started small, the way most endings do. My husband Thomas began forgetting things. Little things at first. Where he put his glasses. What day it was. The name of our neighbor who had lived next door for 20 years. I laughed it off, told him he was getting old, that we both were. But then the forgetting grew teeth. He'd leave the stove on. He'd wander outside in the middle of the night, barefoot and confused, asking for his mother who had been dead for 30 years. I'd find him standing in the garden at dawn, staring at nothing, tears running down his face, and when I'd ask him what was wrong, he'd look at me like I was a stranger, like I was someone he'd never met before. The doctors gave it a name, Alzheimer's. Such a clinical word for something so devastating. They told me what to expect, handed me pamphlets with cheerful fonts and empty platitudes. They said I should prepare myself, that it would get worse, that I'd need help. But how do you prepare to lose someone who's still standing right in front of you? How do you say goodbye to a man who still breathes, still eats, still sleeps beside you, but no longer knows your name? I took care of him. For 3 years I took care of him. I bathed him when he forgot how. I fed him when he refused to eat. I held him when he cried out in the night, terrified of shadows and memories that weren't his own. I sang him the songs we used to dance to, hoping that somewhere in the fog of his mind, he might remember. That he might look at me, just once more, and see me, really see me. Our son Daniel, he tried to help at first. He'd visit on weekends, bring groceries, sit with his father while I rested. But I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at Thomas. There was love there, yes, but also something else. Something darker. Resentment maybe, fear. He didn't want to watch his father disappear. None of us did, but I stayed. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You stay. Then Thomas fell. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember, because I'd just put fresh sheets on the bed, and the sun was coming through the window, in that golden way it does in autumn. He was trying to get to the bathroom on his own, stubborn as always, and his legs just gave out. I heard the crash, heard him calling for someone, not me, never me anymore, and I ran. But I'm old, you see. I'm not as fast as I used to be. By the time I got to him, he was on the floor. His hip twisted at an angle that made my stomach turn. I called for an ambulance, held his hand while we waited, whispered that everything would be okay even though I knew it wouldn't be. The hospital. I hate that place. The fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant trying to mask something rotten underneath, the way the nurses spoke to us like we were children. They operated on Thomas, put pins in his hip, said he'd need extensive rehabilitation. But he didn't understand. He fought them, pulled at his IV, tried to leave his bed convinced he had to get home, had to get to work, had to find his mother. They sedated him. Over and over, they sedated him. And each time he woke up, he was a little less of the man I'd married. A little more lost. Daniel came to see me the hospital cafeteria one evening. I was drinking coffee that tasted like rust, staring at nothing. He sat down across from me, and I could tell by his face that he'd made a decision. That's the thing about my son. He always looked most sure of himself when he was about to break my heart. "Mom," he said, and his voice was careful, measured. "We need to talk about Dad." I knew what was coming. I'd known for months, really, but knowing doesn't make it easier. He needs professional care, Daniel continued. 24-hour supervision. You can't do this anymore. You're exhausted. You're not eating. You're barely sleeping. This is killing you. I wanted to tell him that love is supposed to hurt sometimes, that marriage isn't just the good parts, the easy parts, that when you promise someone forever, you mean it. But I was so tired, my bones ached, my heart ached, and when I looked at my reflection in the window, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. There's a facility, he said. A good one. They specialize in memory care. He'd be comfortable there. Safe. He'd be alone, I said, my voice cracking. He's alone now, Mom. He doesn't know you. He doesn't know anyone. The truth of it cut deeper than any knife. Because he was right. Thomas was gone, the man I loved, the man who used to recite poetry to me while we washed dishes, who taught Daniel to ride a bike, who held me when we lost our daughter before she could take her first breath. That man was gone. What remained was a shell, a shadow, a stranger wearing his face. We moved him to the facility 2 weeks later. Daniel handled everything. The paperwork, the arrangements, the packing of Thomas's things into boxes that would sit in storage, because the room he'd have wouldn't fit a lifetime of memories. I went to see him every day. I sat beside his bed, held his hand, talked to him about things he didn't remember. Sometimes he'd smile at me, a vacant, polite smile. Other times he'd ask me to leave, say he didn't know who I was, that he wanted his wife, his real wife, not this old woman bothering him. The house felt too big without him. Too quiet. I'd find myself setting the table for two, cooking meals for someone who wasn't there. Daniel suggested I move in with him and his family. He had a big house, he said, room for me. His wife Patricia, she'd said it would be fine, though I could hear the hesitation in her voice when Daniel relayed the message. I said no. I couldn't leave the house. It was all I had left of the life I'd built. The walls remembered, even if Thomas didn't, but living alone is harder than you think. The days stretch on forever, empty and shapeless. I started forgetting things too. Not like Thomas, not yet, but little things. I'd forget to pay a bill, forget to eat lunch, forget what day it was. Daniel started calling every evening, checking on me. I could hear the worry in his voice, the subtle frustration creeping in. He had his own life, his own family, a wife who worked long hours, 2 teenage children who barely looked up from their phones. And now he had me. Another responsibility. Another burden. It happened gradually, the shift. His calls became shorter, his visits less frequent. When he did come, there was tension in his shoulders, exhaustion in his eyes. Patricia would wait in the car sometimes, engine running. Their kids never came at all. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself they were busy, that this was normal, that I shouldn't expect so much. But late at night, when the house creaked and settled around me, I felt it. The loneliness, the slow, creeping realization that I was becoming invisible. Thomas died on a Wednesday in March. I was at home when Daniel called. The facility had tried to reach me first, but I'd left my phone in the kitchen and hadn't heard it ring. He was gone, just like that. His heart had simply stopped beating. They said it was peaceful. I've always wondered if that's something they tell everyone, or if it was true. If in those final moments, Thomas found some peace, some clarity, if he remembered even for a second who he was, who I was, who we'd been together. The funeral was small. A few distant relatives, some people from the facility, Daniel and his family. I stood by the grave and felt nothing. Not sadness, not relief, just a vast, echoing emptiness. I'd already grieved for Thomas. I'd been grieving for years. This was just the end of something that had already ended. After the funeral, Daniel took me to lunch. A chain restaurant with too much noise and food that tasted like cardboard. He kept checking his phone, kept glancing at his watch. Finally, he pushed his plate away and looked at me. "Mom, Patricia and I have been talking," he said, "about your living situation." I knew that tone. It was the same one he'd used when he told me about the facility for Thomas. "You shouldn't be alone in that big house. It's not safe. What if you fall? What if something happens and no one's there?" "I'm fine," I said, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. "You're not fine. Last week you called me at 2 in the morning asking where Dad was. You forgot he died, Mom." I had forgotten. Just for a moment, waking up in the dark, I'd reached for him and found empty space. And in my confusion, in that horrible space between sleep and waking, I'd panicked. I'd called Daniel. I'd cried into the phone like a child. I was so ashamed I couldn't speak. "We think you should sell the house. He continued, move into assisted living, somewhere with people around, activities, medical staff on site. It would be better for everyone. Better for everyone, meaning better for him. Better for Patricia. Better for everyone except me. I sold the house. What choice did I have? Daniel said he'd help me find a good place, somewhere I'd be happy, but months passed and nothing was good enough. Too expensive, he said, or too far from where he lived. Or the reviews weren't great. Meanwhile, I stayed in the house packing boxes, giving away belongings, watching my life disappear piece by piece into donations and garbage bags. The day the house sold, Daniel came to help me move, but not to the assisted living facility we'd supposedly been looking for. He pulled up in his car, said there'd been a change of plans. His company was transferring him. They were moving across the country. New job, better opportunity, fresh start. And there wasn't room for me, not yet. He'd get settled first, then we'd figure something out. In the meantime, I'd stay with his wife's mother who lived 2 hours away. A temporary solution, he promised. But I knew, I could see it in his eyes, the relief, the escape. I moved in with Patricia's mother, a bitter woman named Carol who made it clear from day one that I was an imposition. I had a small room at the back of the house that smelled like mothballs and mildew. I tried to be helpful, to cook and clean, to earn my keep, but Carol complained about everything. I used too much water, I left lights on, I made noise when I walked, I was always in the way. Daniel called once a week. Brief conversations filled with promises about figuring things out soon, about getting me my own place, about how things were just hectic with the move and the new job. I believed him because I had to, because the alternative was unbearable. 6 months passed, then a year. Carol's resentment grew into hostility. She'd make cutting remarks about old people, about dead weight, about knowing when you're not wanted. Patricia never called. The grandchildren I'd babysat, whose birthdays I'd never missed, whose scraped knees I'd kissed, they forgot about me. I was erased, I became smaller, quieter. I tried to take up as little space as possible, to be invisible, to not be a burden. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough when's decided you're disposable. Then Carol had a stroke. Not a serious one, but enough to scare her daughter. Patricia came to take care of her mother, and suddenly I was even more in the way. They needed my room for the home health aide. Patricia sat me down one evening, her face carefully blank, and said I'd have to leave. Daniel was coming to get me. We'd figure something else out. He arrived on a Thursday evening. I had my things packed, just 2 suitcases and a box of photographs. Everything else was gone. Given away, sold, lost. He barely spoke as he loaded my bags into the car. Patricia stood in the doorway, arms crossed, didn't even say goodbye. We drove in silence for a while, the sun setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that should have been beautiful but just felt sad. Where are we going? I finally asked. I'm taking you to a place. A friend of mine knows someone who runs a home. It's small, affordable. They have a spot available. A home. He meant a nursing home. A place where old people go to die. Daniel, I don't need a nursing home. I'm not sick, I just need. Mom, I can't do this anymore. His voice was sharp, raw. I have my own family, my own life, my own problems. I can't keep rearranging everything for you. I can't keep worrying every time you call, wondering what's going to be wrong this time. I'm tired. I'm so damn tired. The words hung in the air between us, terrible and true. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to remind him that I'd spent my whole life taking care of him, that I'd sacrificed and struggled and loved him even when it was hard. But what good would it do? He'd already made up his mind. I was a problem that needed solving and he'd found his solution. We drove for another hour. The road grew darker, less familiar. I didn't recognize the area. I started to feel afraid, a cold, creeping fear that started in my stomach and spread through my limbs. Where is this place? I asked. It's just up ahead. But there was nothing ahead. Just dark road, empty fields, the occasional lonely house with lights in the windows. My heart started to race. Daniel, where are you taking me? He didn't answer. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. And then, suddenly, he pulled over to the side of the road, middle of nowhere. No houses, no lights, just darkness pressing in from all sides. Get out, he said. What? Get out of the car. Mom. Daniel, please, what are you doing? He got out, came around to my side, opened my door. I can't do this anymore. I can't. I've tried. But I can't keep carrying you. I can't keep sacrificing everything for someone who's just going to keep taking and taking. I need to let go. I need to be free. He pulled me out of the car. I stumbled, my legs weak, my whole body shaking. He set my suitcases on the gravel beside the road, the box of photographs, everything I had left in the world. Daniel, please, please don't do this. I'm your mother. I'm your mother. I know, he said, and I could hear tears in his voice. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't do this anymore. He got back in the car. I stood there unable to move, unable to process what was happening. He looked at me one last time through the window, his face twisted with guilt and anguish, and something that looked almost like hatred. Then he drove away. I watched the taillights disappear into the darkness, watched until there was nothing left but night and silence, and the terrible understanding that my son had abandoned me, left me on the side of a road in the middle of nowhere like trash he couldn't be bothered to take to the dump. I don't know how long I stood there. Time stopped meaning anything. I was cold. I was so cold. The wind picked up, cutting through my thin jacket. I looked around, trying to see something, anything, but there was just darkness. No houses nearby, no cars passing, just me and the night and the crushing weight of being completely, utterly alone. I thought about sitting down, about closing my eyes and letting the cold take me. It would be easier that way, faster. But something in me, some stubborn, foolish part, kept me standing, kept me breathing. Then, headlights. A car coming from the direction Daniel had driven. For a moment my heart leaped. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he'd come back. But as it got closer I could see it wasn't his car. It was an old pickup truck, rattling and coughing as it approached. It slowed down, stopped. The window rolled down and a face appeared. An old man, probably around my age, with kind eyes and a weathered face. "You all right there, ma'am?" he asked. I tried to speak but no words came out. I just stood there shaking, tears running down my face. He got out of the truck, moved slowly, like his joints hurt. "What are you doing out here alone? Where's your car?" "My son," I finally managed to say. "My son left me here." Something flickered across his face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Like he'd seen this before, knew this story. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you somewhere warm." He helped me into his truck, loaded my suitcases and box into the back. The inside smelled like coffee and old leather. He turned the heat on, handed me a thermos of something hot. Tea it tasted like. "Sweet and strong, name's Henry," he said. "I live about 10 miles up the road. Got a spare room. You can stay there tonight, we'll figure out what to do in the morning." I should have been suspicious. Should have questioned why a strange man would help me, but I was too tired, too broken, and there was something in his eyes that told me I could trust him. His house was small but clean. Warm, he made up the spare room for me, gave me fresh towels, told me to rest. I lay in that bed, in a stranger's house, and cried. Cried for Thomas, for the life I'd lost, for my son who I no longer recognized, for myself and the foolish hope I'd carried that family meant something. In the morning, Henry made breakfast, eggs and toast and coffee that actually tasted good. We sat at his kitchen table and he told me his story. He'd been married once, had 3 children, his wife died young cancer, and he'd raised those kids alone. Worked 2 jobs, sacrificed everything. When they grew up, they scattered. Moved away, stopped calling, stopped visiting. On his 70th birthday, not one of them remembered, he said. About being forgotten. About being left behind. "But you saved yourself," I said. "You built a life." "Took time," he said. "And I had to let go of expecting anything from them. Had to find my own reason to wake up every morning." He let me stay. Not just that night, but the next, and the one after that. Weeks turned into months. I helped around the house, cooked meals, tended the small garden he kept. We fell into a rhythm, 2 lonely old people keeping each other company. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even really friendship at first. It was just survival. 2 people who understood what it meant to be abandoned, to be deemed worthless by the people who were supposed to love you most. But slowly, something shifted. I started to laugh again. Started to remember who I was before I became just someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's burden. Henry taught me to play chess. I taught him to make bread. We watched old movies together, argued about politics, sat in comfortable silence on the porch watching the sunset. Daniel never came looking for me, never called. I stopped expecting him to, stopped hoping. The pain of it never really went away, but it became something I could carry, a scar instead of an open wound. 1 year after Henry found me, he got sick, cancer, the same thing that took his wife. It was fast, aggressive. I took care of him the way I'd taken care of Thomas, but this time it was different. This time, the man I was caring for still knew my name, still smiled when he saw me, still held my hand and squeezed it to say thank you. He died on a quiet morning in spring. I was with him. His last words were, "You saved me too, you know, that night. You saved me too." I understood what he meant. Sometimes saving someone isn't about the grand gesture, it's about being there, about seeing someone when they're invisible, about choosing every single day to stay. I still live in Henry's house. It's my house now. He left it to me, along with everything else he had. I tend the garden, I bake bread, I volunteer at the library in town, read to children who sit wide-eyed and listen to stories. I've built a life here, a small one maybe, but it's mine. Sometimes I think about Daniel, wonder where he is, if he's happy, if he ever thinks about that night, if he feels guilt or relief or nothing at all. I like to think that somewhere, in the quiet moments before sleep, he remembers, that he carries his own scars, that he understands what he threw away when he left me on that road. But mostly, I think about kindness, about how a stranger showed me more love in one moment than my own son did in years, about how family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the person who stops when everyone else drives past. Sometimes it's the hand that reaches out in the darkness. Sometimes it's the choice to see someone, really see them, when the whole world has decided they're invisible. I am 73 years old. My hands shake when I hold a cup of tea. But I am not alone. I am not forgotten. I am not a burden. I am a woman who survived being thrown away, who found grace in the kindness of strangers, who learned that the end of one story can be the beginning of another, if you're brave enough to keep turning pages. And that night, that terrible night when my son drove away, and left me standing in the dark, when I thought my life was over, when I wanted to just lie down and let the cold take me. That night was the night I found out who I really was. Not someone's mother, not someone's wife, not someone's obligation, just Margaret, just Maggie. Just a human being deserving of love and dignity and a warm place to sleep. The stranger who stopped changed the course of my story. But in the end, I think I changed his too. We saved each other. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.